Far beyond the stars that are easy to see from Earth, astronomers have been studying a distant world whose atmosphere may contain one of the most intriguing chemical clues ever observed beyond our solar system. The planet is known as K218b, a distant super-Earth orbiting a red dwarf star roughly 120 light-years away. For years, this world was already considered interesting because observations suggested the presence of water vapor and a hydrogen-rich atmosphere. But more recent observations with the James Webb Space Telescope brought a much more fascinating possibility into the discussion. When a planet passes directly in front of its star, a tiny portion of the starlight travels through the planet's atmosphere before reaching our telescopes. Different gases absorb different wavelengths of light. By studying those missing wavelengths, scientists can work backward and determine which chemicals may be present high above the planet. This technique turns a distant atmosphere into something like a fingerprint. For K218b, researchers have reported evidence of several molecules, including water vapor, methane, and carbon dioxide. These chemicals are interesting by themselves, but one particular molecule has attracted extraordinary attention: dimethyl sulfide, commonly abbreviated as DMS. On Earth, DMS is strongly associated with biological activity, especially marine microorganisms. That does not automatically mean that detecting DMS on another planet proves life exists there. Chemistry can be complicated, and scientists must carefully investigate every possible non-biological explanation before making such a claim. Still, the possibility is remarkable. Imagine receiving light that left another planetary system more than a century ago, traveling through interstellar space before finally reaching a telescope on Earth. Hidden within that light could be information about the chemistry of an ocean world unimaginably far away. K218b is not another Earth. It is considerably larger and more massive than our planet, placing it in the category known as a super-Earth. Scientists have proposed that it may have a deep atmosphere dominated by hydrogen and possibly a huge amount of water beneath the clouds. That combination makes K218b especially interesting. The planet orbits its star much closer than Earth orbits the Sun, completing one revolution in only a little over a month. Yet its host star is much cooler and smaller than our Sun. Because of this, K218b receives an amount of energy that may allow temperatures suitable for liquid water under certain atmospheric conditions. This is where the story becomes much more complicated. A planet being inside a star's habitable zone does not automatically make it habitable. The habitable zone is simply the region where conditions could allow liquid water to exist on a suitable surface. Atmosphere, pressure, chemistry, cloud cover, internal structure, and many other factors can completely change the outcome. K218b may therefore represent something very different from the traditional picture of a habitable planet. Instead of searching only for small rocky worlds that resemble Earth, scientists are beginning to consider whether larger planets with hydrogen-rich atmospheres could also provide environments suitable for life. That possibility could dramatically expand the search. For decades, Earth served as the main example scientists had when thinking about habitability. We live on a rocky planet with oceans, an atmosphere, a moderate temperature range, and a relatively stable star. It was natural to assume that life elsewhere might require something similar. But nature does not necessarily follow our expectations. K218b may have an entirely different environment. Beneath its atmosphere could be a global ocean or a deep water-rich layer extending far below the clouds. If such an ocean exists, the conditions at depth could be radically different from anything found on Earth. Pressure would increase enormously. Temperature could change with depth. Water could interact with hydrogen and other chemicals in ways that are unfamiliar to terrestrial biology. And somewhere within that enormous environment, if life exists at all, organisms could potentially survive without ever resembling anything found on Earth. This is one reason the planet has become such an important target for observation. The most interesting question is not simply whether K218b contains water. Water alone is not enough. Scientists want to know whether its atmosphere displays a combination of gases that is difficult to explain without biological activity. Earth provides an example of this principle. Our atmosphere is chemically active. Oxygen, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and many other substances are constantly being produced, consumed, and recycled. Life plays an enormous role in maintaining some of these chemical patterns. If a distant planet displayed a similar atmospheric imbalance, scientists would have to investigate whether biology could be responsible. But there is an important distinction between a biosignature and proof of life. A biosignature is a chemical or physical feature that could potentially be produced by life. It is not automatically evidence that organisms are definitely present. That distinction is especially important when studying a planet more than 100 light-years. What makes K218b even more fascinating is that the story does not end with detecting a few interesting molecules. The real mystery is what those chemicals are telling us about the planet itself. If the atmosphere is truly rich in hydrogen, methane, carbon dioxide, and other compounds, then K218b could operate under atmospheric conditions very different from Earth. Its thick atmosphere may control the temperature of the planet and influence how energy moves between the upper atmosphere and the possible ocean below. But there is another possibility that scientists have to consider. The chemicals detected in the atmosphere might be produced without life. This is one of the biggest challenges in the search for extraterrestrial biology. A molecule can be associated with life on Earth without being exclusively produced by life everywhere in the universe. Different planets have different temperatures, pressures, radiation levels, and chemical environments. A process that is uncommon on Earth could potentially become important somewhere else. That is why scientists cannot simply see one molecule and announce that aliens have been discovered. Instead, they need a collection of evidence. They need to understand the planet's atmosphere. They need to determine how much water may exist. They need to examine the planet's temperature and pressure. They need to calculate whether known geological processes could create the same chemical pattern. And most importantly, they need repeated observations. Every additional observation can either strengthen the biological explanation or reveal a completely different one. This is where future studies of K218b become so important. If the suspected molecules continue appearing in observations, scientists will have greater confidence that the signal is real. If other chemical compounds appear alongside them, the picture could become even more interesting. Eventually, researchers may be able to construct a detailed atmospheric model of the planet. They could determine how gases move through the atmosphere, how clouds influence the climate, and how chemistry changes at different altitudes. That would allow scientists to compare K218b with Earth and other exoplanets. And the comparison could reveal something extremely important. Maybe there is no single recipe for habitability. Earth might simply be one version of a much larger family of living environments. For example, life on K218b would not necessarily need to live on solid ground. If a deep global ocean exists, organisms could potentially occupy layers within the water. On Earth, the deepest parts of our oceans already contain ecosystems that survive without direct sunlight. Chemical reactions involving minerals and dissolved substances can provide energy for microorganisms. An alien ocean could potentially contain completely different chemical cycles. The organisms would not need to resemble fish or plants. They might be microscopic. They might form enormous colonies. They might use chemical reactions that are unfamiliar to terrestrial biology. Or there might be no organisms at all. At this point, all of these possibilities remain open. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes K218b so scientifically valuable. There is also a bigger question about red dwarf stars. These small stars are incredibly common throughout the Milky Way. If planets like K218b can maintain stable environments around them, then the number of potentially interesting worlds in our galaxy could be enormous. Instead of searching only around stars similar to the Sun, astronomers can investigate the countless planetary systems surrounding red dwarfs. This changes the scale of the search. The galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars. Even if only a small percentage possess suitable planets, that could still represent an enormous number of worlds. And if life can survive under a wider range of conditions than previously expected, the possibilities become even greater. K218b therefore represents more than one distant planet. It represents a test of our assumptions. For a long time, scientists often focused on finding rocky planets similar in size to Earth. That strategy still makes sense. But K218b shows why scientists should also investigate worlds that look completely different. The universe may have many pathways toward habitability. Some planets could be rocky. Some could be ocean worlds. Some could have thick atmospheres. Some could orbit red dwarfs. Others could exist around stars much more similar to our Sun. The important question is not whether these worlds look like Earth. The important question is whether their physical and chemical conditions can support the processes required for life. And that distinction could transform the search for extraterrestrial biology. Imagine that future observations eventually confirm a strong biological signature on K218b. The planet would immediately become one of the most important discoveries in human history. But even then, humanity would still face an enormous mystery. We would know that life exists somewhere else. We would not yet know how it began. We would not know whether it is common. We would not know whether it evolved independently in many places. And we would not know whether complex life exists beyond Earth. Those questions would become the next frontier. If life appears